I feel like if you're really challenged by the day's activities and just exhausted and worn out by what's going on, you know you're working for a higher purpose than yourself. I'm not just enriching somebody that way. I'm enriching somebody's life with my work.
That's my next guest, Opal Jones, the CEO and president of Doorways, a nonprofit organization that provides support to people living with HIV. At first, Opal didn't set out to lead the organization, but her passion for the organization's mission ultimately landed her the job. She also sits on a number of boards in St. Louis to help make sure people have free access to things like the arts. So how does she find the time and motivation to make such an impact in her community? By making zero excuses and focusing on what she knows she can accomplish. I'm Nick Smorelli, and here's my conversation with Opal. Hi, Opal. Welcome to the show. If you don't mind, let's start the conversation with telling our listeners a little bit more about you.
I have lived in the St. Louis area for the past 30 years. I love to lift us up as a community. I think it's a special place to live and offers a lot of opportunity. And we've gotten kind of a bad rap, I think, in recent years, and somewhat deservedly so. But it's a great community to live, and I want to see us uplifted for what we've done and what we can do. So I kind of take that framework and in my personal life and in my professional life and make sure that I'm part of the community, part of solution, and hopefully moving us forward. I've been a stay-at-home mom, and I've been a nonprofit CEO and different things in between. And so when I think about St. Louis, I think about when I was at home with my kids on a very limited income, how the zoo was free and accessible to me, the botanical garden, all of these things, these great community resources, which are world class, that are available to almost anyone. And then as to now being in this role as a CEO and being able to help shape some of the development, I guess we can talk a little bit about Doorways. We provide housing and healthcare to people living with HIV. And one of our big projects right now is the development of a 3-acre campus in North St. Louis. And so when I'm talking about my views on St. Louis again, it's like in this role, being able to help develop portion of the city that hasn't been developed or not had the appropriate amount of resources allocated to it. That's exciting for me too as a community member. So I come at this from many different angles, having benefited from services and arts and all of the cultural experiences that our community has to offer, and now being in a position to shape that development, but also sit on boards like the Muni and make it possible for other people to enjoy free concerts and free theater and so forth.
Talk a little bit about your journey from you're staying at home, taking care of your 2 boys, and then you went back into the workforce, joining a nonprofit, and then obviously moving to Doorways to now your role as CEO.
So I never intended to be any of these things. I guess that's how we should start. I was a young bride and mom. And so right out of college, I had my first child, actually my senior year of college. And I knew I wanted to stay at home with my children. Both of my sons have some special needs. So it turned out to be a great decision because somebody needed to kind of oversee their care and therapy and so forth. And I was able to do that, thankfully, with the flexibility of staying at home. Once my youngest entered a full-time preschool program, I went to work, and I chose nonprofit, even though I had a degree in business. I always thought like I wanted to be the CEO of a for-profit company. I didn't know I would end up being the CEO of a nonprofit company. I chose nonprofit because I thought that, this will be a way to ease into the workforce. What I did not realize is how challenging nonprofits would be because we're so low resourced in many ways. And we all, just like any small organization, we wear 10 different hats and you just have to do whatever you have to do to make it happen. But My career, I had a very fast trajectory. I was at the Y for a few years, and then when they were going to close that center, I went over to Doorways. And so it wasn't the job that I wanted because, we all want to move up in our next job. I was office manager at the YWCA, and I had to take a role as office manager and executive assistant to the president at Doorways because it was 2008 and opportunities were limited. So it was very much a lateral move, but it was a move that I thought would be good because I got on so well with the previous president. I got over to Doorways and started to work there. It was quickly determined that I was underutilized. And so then I was promoted over to one of our bigger housing programs that was just notoriously considered difficult at Doorways. And unfortunately, our longtime president took ill. She got pancreatic cancer. And so our board conducted a national search to find the next leader of Doorways. And there was a part of me that wanted to do it, but then there was a part of me that knew I was inexperienced and unqualified in many ways. And so I had a number of people whisper in my ear, you can run this place. And it came down to it that the reason I applied was I felt the culture was so special, that the place was so special and the mission was so special. Like, this is a very vital community resource. It has to be preserved and protected. And I don't want the culture of this place to change. And so that's why I put my hat in the ring. And I was not as seasoned as some of the other applicants, but I came at the position through the application process, I think, with a lot of fire and ideas, and had worked internally and knew what the challenges and some of the opportunities were. And so I came to the board through that process with that kind of lens and fire and was hired. So I went from 7 years being, housewife, stay-at-home mom to CEO of, at that time, like a $5 million mid-sized nonprofit. So then I was like, oh, shoot, what do I do? I told the board that I could do this, and now I have to do it. I was so scared. I did not eat for 3 days. And then it finally got to me like, okay, you put together a plan. You need to start working on it. And I did. And the rest has been history.
So is there a part of you that years later still feels that twinge of I'm not qualified, or have you kind of gotten over that?
Oh, I feel that way all the time. I think a lot of us feel that imposter syndrome, right? And I'll tell you why too, because I don't do a lot of the work at Doorways. I oversee the work. I'm asking good questions. I am moving something forward, but I'm not the one writing the grant, the report. I'm not the one doing a lot of the work. So sometimes if you're not that close to the work, sometimes you don't necessarily feel responsible for it. But by the same token, I realize that's not my job. My job is to develop the people around me and to move the mission forward. So I have to have the smartest people, the most dedicated people, and they come with such great ideas that I just kind of leave them alone and let them do it and just make sure that they've thought through everything. And I'm just fascinated all the time by, oh my God, this is how I would have done this. They brought something back to me that was 10 times better because I did not stifle everybody's ideas and creativity with just my own ideas. I don't want to be the dictator, the know-it-all, and every decision has to, be the one that I would choose.
Prior to being selected as CEO, what qualities did they see in you that you think shined, that allowed you to accelerate to the top of the organization?
I exhibited good judgment pretty much most of the time. I can't say always because we're always growing and learning, but I was managing something that was very complicated with people. Our business is people and nonprofits, and people are dynamic, they're complicated, they're messy, and to be able to cut through that, exercise good judgment, be fair, still understand the regulatory nature of what needs to go on and keep the wheels moving on big programs like that. I think that that is somewhat of a talent and a lot of skills put together. And then the second thing is kind of that whole political side and the relationship building side. Our jobs as CEO, I mean, like most of this is political. I'm tasked with keeping everybody happy and feeling good about the contribution they make as a stakeholder, whether that's the volunteer coming in, that's the board of directors who are trying to govern the organization, and the donors writing checks, the employees doing their work. All of that requires finesse in dealing with so many different types of personalities and folks who need to get something different from the mission, and clients too. And so I think that whole political piece is not skills driven in the same way that the operations side of an organization is. Some people have that, some people don't. I'm sure it can be improved and harnessed, and I know I've improved it in my own self, but you just can't give that to people. And I think that maybe they saw that I had some talents there and that I might be a good fundraiser and ambassador for the organization.
As you kind of look at your journey and you talk about a little bit about imposter syndrome, you talk a little bit about that step up, and obviously you've got these fantastic qualities that have, Doorways continues to grow, but how do you overcome the fear of being perhaps seen as underqualified, or how do you get over that mental mindset?
That's a good question. I don't fear that anymore because I'm in this role now to be 9 years soon. But for years I did. It took me 3 years to figure out what this job actually was. I had to study other CEOs in the nonprofit space and see how they kind of dealt with people and things and what kind of projects they took on. And then I was like, oh, now I know what I'm supposed to do. And that's not to say that those 3 years were bad. It's just that that's how long it took me to really figure out my voice in all of this and how I was going to be as a CEO. CEOs have all kind of temperaments. Some grow organizations, some stabilize organizations. But I'll tell you what my approach was, and I think that it worked because I knew I had to kind of fake it till I made it, so to speak. And my only philosophy coming into this job was I'm going to make everybody think they're on a winning team because success begets success. And I've seen that again and again. And so I just said, I'm going to have some early wins and they're going to get excited. The board's going to get excited. People are going to think we're a growing, thriving organization. And that was the only real philosophy I had going into the role. And then after so many years of us growing and doing well, then I believed it myself. And that kind of helped with the imposter syndrome. And now I do feel very qualified because I have years of success behind me and a great team behind me and a great board behind me that I can point to real things that we've done that have moved the needle at Doorways in the lives of people in the St. Louis community. And there's a real solid track record there that no one can take from me and say, hey, you're just here filling up space, but what have you done? We've done plenty of things. We've helped people live better lives. We've improved the quality of our program. We've added on different services. We were just housing at first. And my time managing our housing programs, I realized these folks need a lot more services. So now we have an employment program at Doorways. We have a behavioral health program at Doorways. And that was born out of my own, not ideas, but insecurities in running our programs and being a leader. Because I was never trained in social work. My degrees are in business. And I realized people need a lot more assistance than I'm qualified to give them, or some of our staff are qualified to give them. So let's raise the money to bring in professionals who have masters in social work, who are licensed therapists, who are all of these things, and let's give the clients what they actually need.
I feel like with COVID, it became the disease that everybody focused on.
Disease du jour.
It was. And it seemed like everything else kind of fell to the wayside. Talk a little bit about how do you create a sense of urgency in the community to continue to support programs like yourself when it seems like there's so much attention on other items?
Even prior to COVID, we had that issue because you think about HIV, kind of its heyday, right, in people's minds was the 80s and 90s. Then when the medications came out that are really good and effective, a lot of people thought that the issue went away. So it became a back burner issue in the minds of many people. So if I can go back to the previous question, how I kind of dealt with that imposter syndrome and all of that, one of my earliest ideas was to try to bring as much attention to doorways just to deal with that right there through marketing efforts and getting newspaper stories and so forth to let people know that that's not true. There's more people living with HIV than there ever was, partially because of the rate of still high infections. We've got about 500 new infections in Missouri every year. Missouri is one of the states that continues to see growth in that area, but also because people are living longer. The medications are good, but while they're living longer, HIV affects more and more marginalized communities. So people of color, the LGBTQ community, homeless individuals. And so we know that around 8 out of 10 out of all people living with HIV in our area live below the poverty line. So if there's more people to help every year, that's a strain on our resources. And that means Doorways has to provide more services. People come to us with so many complex needs around mental health, substance abuse, employment, lack of resources, generational poverty, all of these things. Then you add in stigma, isolation. There's a lot of work for us to do. And so what we tried to do, fast forwarding it to COVID, is to not fight with COVID. COVID is going to be the front page story, and it should be. It's affecting the entire world. So what we tried to do was just ride on the tails or get on the piggyback of COVID to say, you know what, COVID is real, but it's not the first pandemic that was out here. Don't forget that the HIV/AIDS pandemic has been ongoing, right, since the late 70s or early 80s when it was known as to what it was. So that pandemic is still going on and very much real. And then secondly, COVID has affected this community or could affect this community worse than it is the broader community. And don't forget that there are subsets within our population, like people living with HIV, that really need to be paid attention to carefully in the midst of the COVID pandemic. And that's how we've been able to stay relevant, by going with the times instead of fighting against them.
What's one common myth that you wish you could debunk within the community that you serve?
There are still people who are so incredibly ignorant about how you get HIV. We've had companies that won't work at our building because the technician won't come in because they can get HIV through the air, supposedly. So we've had issues like that. And then the other thing that I wish people knew is that now with the medications, and if people are adherent to their medications, they can become what is called undetectable, which means there is so little virus in your blood that it's practically undetectable through a lab test. Those people cannot transmit HIV through sex. So I'm going to say it again. If you have HIV and you take your medications and that are adherent and you become undetectable, which you can do within 6 months in many cases, in less than 6 months, you cannot transmit HIV to another person via sex. So that is already the path to the end of the epidemic, because then we render the virus untransmissible. And so that's the exciting part of this work. But Nick, that does not happen if people are unstable. And that's where places like Doorways comes in. You cannot become undetectable and adherent to your medications when you have no place to live, when you don't know where your next meal is coming from. And with the levels of poverty in the HIV community, the fact that more than 50% of all people living with HIV will be homeless at some point in their lifetime, we have to provide those everyday services and housing services to people to give them that fighting chance to be able to stay on top of their medication regimen and become undetectable.
I actually learned a few things there too. So I appreciate you sharing the facts. Talking a little bit more about your story, is there somebody that influenced you along the way to be who you are right now?
I mean, we get influenced by so many people, right? The first person I think was my mother. She was a single mother of four, just didn't make excuses for her situation. I worked hard. She became a police officer with the Milwaukee Police Department. She was one of the first Black female cops within their ranks. It was not easy for her, and she just showed us hard work, determination, and you just don't make excuses for your situation. You just do what you need to do to raise your kids and support your family. I've had a number of, I would say, informal mentors, friends like one of my best friends, Jennifer Elin, who was out doing great work with women entrepreneurs and was just a great career minded person that I saw she was further advanced in her career because she wasn't a stay at home mom like me. So when I got to different sticking points in my career or opportunities, she might be a sounding board and help me figure some things out. I've just had a number of other CEOs in the nonprofit space who've just been great mentors and friends to me. In terms of how I found my way to nonprofit space, like I said, it was just the fact that I thought nonprofit might be easier when I was trying to find an entree back into the workforce. I've stayed here because it's fulfilling work. I know I could go and make more money at this point, especially since I've proven that I can grow organizations and harness talent and do all of those things. But I've stayed in the nonprofit space, and particularly at Doorways, because it's just so fulfilling. I feel like if you're really challenged by the day's activities and just exhausted and worn out by what's going on, you know you're working for a higher purpose than yourself. I'm not just enriching somebody that way. I'm enriching somebody's life with my work. So that keeps me motivated. This is extraordinarily difficult work between pulling off all of the public financing to juggle all of the balls and keep people engaged and keep the checks coming in and keep people happy who you're not paying market salaries to all the time. It's a challenging job, but it's so very fulfilling that it's hard to imagine what else I could do and be so satisfied doing.
As you look towards the next 12 months, what gives you a sense of hope?
Oh gosh, the next 12 months for us are so challenging, Nick, because we're working towards opening up this campus and I still have millions of dollars to raise and we're already planning for phase two, plus just the logistics of opening up a campus and expanding programs. It's daunting. There's a part of me that wants to go to sleep and wake up in a year into the ribbon cutting ceremony. And I know that's not possible, so I had to put on my big girl pants and live this 12 months. But what gives me hope is the fact that I know our organization is favored. I've told my staff that many times because we have never had a need that has gone unfulfilled. So as difficult as this time is for us managing this through COVID, now imagine this, we've got nursing facilities and all kinds of stuff going on that have been like the hotbeds of COVID, right? So we're trying to do all of this in the midst of this pandemic. As difficult as it is, I know that we will prevail because we always do, and we have always gotten everything we need.
In the face of more people are getting HIV, more people have needs, you will never be able to take care of everybody. How do you keep and maintain a sense of optimism?
I try not to look at that and celebrate the successes we do have. We used to serve 1,800 people a year. We serve well over 3,000 people a year now. So that's not everybody, but it's way more because we've been able to cobble the resources and get the community support behind it. If I looked at it that way, there are so many problems this world has beyond HIV. How can we solve poverty, hunger, racism, all of these things? They're too big for me to contemplate as one human being. So what I have to do is focus on the things that I can do, how I can move the needle within this organization. So I can't solve all of HIV. I can't provide a house for every single person, but we can open up 50 new units next year. And then a couple of years after that, we can open up phase 2. And 50 families next year will have housing because we were successful. And that's how I have to look at it.
Have you joined our Zero Excuses community yet on LinkedIn? You'll get connected to other business leaders achieving amazing things while staying grounded to their values. Simply search Zero Excuses on LinkedIn and you'll find us.